I think we'll go ahead and get our presentation started to be timely today. I'm Sue Barneson here on behalf of the Centric Center for Patient Family and Community Engagement and Chronic Care Management. We welcome all of you, and this seminar is also sponsored by IDEA CTR. So we are excited to have our panel here today. This has been such a hot topic around use of social media for recruitment of subjects in our studies that we tried to put together a panel who could address some of these concerns and actually help you kind of be able to tap into other resources too. So on our panel today, to my immediate left is Kara Smith, who is one of the project study coordinators for Dr. Nancy Waltman's study, and Nancy will talk to you about that. Dr. Nancy Waltman is here, who has funded our one study and used social media. And Dr. Robin Lally is here today too, and Robin also uses social media for recruitment. But we are very honored to have 3 additional panelists with us today. And sitting next to Robin is Aurelie Ballard, who is actually the social media expert in the public relations area, but her position is actually a digital media manager at UNMC. And we are very excited to hear from her perspective how she has worked with researchers. And along with her is Lisa Spellman, who is a public relations media specialist. So both of those panelists today represent that. And we are very honored to have Kevin Epperson with us today as an IRB administrator to help us sort this all out in terms of protecting our subjects' rights. So with that being said, I think, Claire, you have a few remarks that you'd like to make. If somebody has an open mic, you might want to mute that. We would appreciate that. Then we don't get all of that overlay of sound. Thank you.
Okay. Hello. Hi. So I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to start out with a summary. The most cost-effective way to get our subjects' foot in the door was by doing Facebook posts. And when I say that it was cost-effective, we had mailing postcards, which were also effective, but the Facebook posts were 8 times less the cost than those mailing postcards. So this is our study. We had to, not sure why it's not moving forward, but okay. We had to enroll around 275 women. The goal of the study was to evaluate the best way to prevent bone loss in women with low bone mass. We know from the literature that 1 in 3 women in our age category have low bone mass. So we needed to do screening DEXAs on around 900 women. In order for them to screen for the study, we had pre-screening criteria they had to meet. So we knew that we had to reach thousands of women. Our target population was relatively healthy women in the Omaha-Lincoln area. That seems simple enough. There's a lot of them. However, they had to meet that inclusion-exclusion criteria, and they had to be willing to commit to a study which involved potentially doing a weight training program 3 times a week at a YMCA. So these women are very busy, so that may be considered a commitment. We used several recruitment strategies in order to get these women into our study if they were interested and willing to participate. So this kind of shows us our recruitment methods through the years. We started out by doing community events, presentations, health fairs, and you can see that it wasn't very effective. That doesn't mean that it wasn't valuable. The S is the number of people that we screened in the year. The E is the number of people that we enrolled. In the second year, we hit our first break, and that was with Mel's idea to do mailing postcards. So we sent out postcards to thousands of women in our age category. Also during that year, we partnered with physicians to send out letters about our study on their behalf. So that happened during that year. As we saw diminishing returns with the postcards, we started doing random Facebook posts. And we saw immediately that we had an increase in the number of women that completed our online pre-screening questionnaire. So in the last year of our study, we focused kind of on doing a routine, planned, targeted Facebook ad campaign. And that helped us to reach our enrollment goal of 275 women. And we had all kinds of other methods always out there that women could see if they were interested, that they could go to our website. and learn more about our study. Recently, we published a paper about our recruitment efforts. So we analyzed what worked and what didn't work. And as I mentioned before, it was predominantly the provider letters, the postcards, and Facebook. You can see when we talk about the number of subjects recruited, what we mean is the number of women that went to our website and completed an online pre-screening questionnaire. And in that questionnaire, we asked them, how did you hear about the study? So you can see with Facebook, we had a significant number of people heard about the study with Facebook compared to postcards and the provider letters. We also looked at the cost. So if you look at the cost, you can tell that the Facebook posts were significantly less than doing the postcards. And when we talk about postcards, we sent out about 70,000 postcards. So we're talking about buying the mailing list and also all the postage involved. The Facebook, we spent about $5,000. And if you remember, we had a large number of people respond to that Facebook ad. What's interesting, though, is the fact that when we talk about recruitment, we talk about them putting a foot in the door. The actual number that went through the door, in other words, enrolled in the study, was similar postcards and Facebook. So that was something else. In our next study, we have the same general population that we'll investigate a little bit farther. We'll work with our social media coordinator to see how can we better target our Facebook campaign in order to get not only those people interested, but if they're eligible and willing to participate, enrolled in our study. Okay. This is an example of our boosted Facebook post. I think Kevin's going to talk a little bit more about what's involved as far as making sure that it meets all the ethical requirements, just like any other recruitment material when you use social media, not just the content, but how you're targeting the population. Okay. I would also say that one of the biggest things that we did was the fact that our recruitment was very proactive as opposed to reactive. We always had recruitment materials out there because people have to see your message about 7 times before they're actually going to take some action on it. So it's important to have all your materials approved and ready to go with your initial IRB application. So.
Did you all get a handout? Because, you know, there's information on who to contact as far as Facebook.
Which is you now.
You know, right.
For those people online, we will post the PowerPoint for the participants today. So thank you, Nancy.
And also the handout.
The
yes.
handout.
And also, I just want to say Mel Meisinger there and Kara Smith. You know, I don't know that much about technology and I don't use social media. Thank you to my team.
Thank you, team. Dr. Lally, would you like to share how you use social media in your study?
I don't have a PowerPoint. Do you want me to just use
Yes, that microphone
Great.
is live now. So if you want to
Am I
use
close
that.
enough?
I think you're close enough. Is
People
she
hear
close
me
enough to
okay?
get it? At the
Everywhere?
distant sites, can you hear Dr. Lally?
My mother always said I didn't need a microphone. I was plenty loud enough. But, yes, I'm sorry. I don't have a PowerPoint because I didn't really have much to put on the PowerPoint. My experience has been quite different because I recruit. Let me watch my watch here. I have 5 minutes. Okay. I recruit individuals who are very different. So my message to you is context is the most important factor when you're thinking about how you're going to recruit. I, for the last about 14 years or so, have been exclusively recruiting women who are newly diagnosed with breast cancer within the first weeks to 3 months of their diagnosis. So during that period of time, they've just been told, first of all, they had their mammogram. Some of you are old enough to have had one, some are not here, I see in front of me. But, you know, they went in there thinking they were perfectly okay, and they have been told that they have cancer and it has turned their life upside down. So in comes Robin. Would you like to participate in a study? Not too much, usually. So yeah, it's a highly distressful time, but it's very, very important because what I study is distress. So I need to study them at this time, and I need to start interacting and intervening because the National Comprehensive Cancer Network informs us that this is the prime time to start intervening with individuals with distress. Earlier is better to not let it fester. So over all of this time until most of the time I was using flyers and brochures, recruiting from cancer centers. In my case, it really works the best overall. I would say the best strategy always is the in-person contact. So working with the physician, whoever has the ethical access to the patient, and having them introduce the study and seeing if they're interested in talking to you further about that. Cancer, you have to think about your disease that you're recruiting for as well. Cancer holds a lot of stigma. So does mental health and mental illness and stress. Even more so, I think, in the Midwest. I'm a Midwesterner to begin with, from Minnesota. Then I went out to New York for about 10 years. And I found less stigma, I think, as far as saying that I'm distressed or that I would like some help like that out east as compared to in the Midwest, where when I did focus groups here, women said, we take care of ourselves. I'm just fine with my, country doctor here and all this. I, really don't want to do things with the university. So again, context, your disease context, the timing context. I also recruit women. The median age for breast cancer is 62. That doesn't mean that, that's all the age I recruit, but the average age of my studies is about 54. Now, as time moves on, more and more and more people are using social media. When I first started, the 54-year-olds, 15, 20 years ago weren't using social media necessarily so much. Now it's almost swung almost completely around the other way, is that Facebook does seem to be for the older folks. And, I see a lot of young faces in front of me here. A lot of you probably maybe don't even use Facebook. I hear that that's not the thing anymore. I did try then a Facebook page with one of my last studies at my last university. That was completely unsuccessful because I did not know anything about pushing it and all that. It was a page. We made a actual page, somehow expecting people to just find this page, which didn't happen. Here, then I worked with all the folks in the marketing department and such to do Facebook ads. And these ads then were specifically targeted. You can target them to individuals of a certain age group, gender, such and such. And then they were driven by the click of a button to our web page at the College of Nursing, which that web page looks a lot like the brochure that I have, has all the same sort of IRB approved information and things on it. And then it has an I'm interested button. So we have received, for the Facebook will tell us that we reached, 20,000 people or something like that, and had, X number of shares and all of that. I can count on one hand the number of people who have clicked the I'm interested button, because again, I'm looking for people within the first couple months of their diagnosis. Are they surfing around on there? Are they looking at it? Can they feel that they can trust it? I think trust is the next number one. I should have said that was the number one thing. And they trust their physician, they trust their clinic, they trust the people who are caring for them, especially when they've got a scary disease. So the best luck we've had is working closely with our clinical partners and having them introduce us and going in and talking to them. We put the brochures out. Now, my last study in New York, women picked up those brochures. They called from the signs I had posted on the back of the clinic doors. Evidently, doctors in New York let you sit in that room in your paper dress a lot longer because they would call on their own. And that's how I recruited 111 women called on their own without any physician referring them. They just saw the flyer and called. Here, that's not happening at all. I think I've maybe had one call, and I've been here 3 years. And I did get one call from Minnesota, and it was for the wrong study. But they're just not calling. So it's the personal touch. My brochure also, the first brochure that I used here, when you work with the marketing and the UNMC, they require certain things, certain colors, certain all this stuff on the brochure. The first brochure was okay. The second brochure, I thought, we'll put a picture on it. So we put a picture of two Nebraska women, and I thought that would work so well. That did not seem to work either. I do seem to get more bang for my buck out of the brochure now that we put one of those goddamn pink ribbons on there, which usually women with breast cancer kind of steer away a bit from that. So So, and again, marketing did that. They put an acceptable whatever thing on the front and did that. And I think it's more colorful. They understand that it's breast cancer. So I think that that's my time, but that's what I wanted to say. So context.
Good. And then I think, Aurelie, you would like to share a little bit more from your perspective, how you help researchers and what your role is.
Yes, so I do the hard work for the researchers. Everything that Kara talked about, they bring that information to me and I just transform it into an ad. So usually when the researchers reach out to me, they will send me the information and I will provide a template for them to just give me demographics such as geography, what states are they wanting to hit, to target certain people, certain age group, interests that relates to the study. And I take all that information and I design the ad. So I make sure there's a look and a feel for the ad because that's the only way it'll attract people who are just scrolling through Facebook. And there is a certain rule on Facebook that some people have to see, well, a lot of people have to see the ad a certain amount of times before they actually click on it. So I make sure to add resources such as the research link where they could get more information about the research study, because on the ad we keep it very short. And I know researchers, they like to keep things wordy and have details, but obviously no one's going to read so much. So I try to keep things to 2 sentences, make sure that people understand it, and provide a link and they could click on it where it says I'm interested and they read more about the research. We make sure to have them provide basically what will people get if they do sign up for the study, like whether it's a gift card or whatever. A lot of people are interested in stuff like that because that's the only way they'll be interested. But my job is just to take all that information, make it short, make it attractive, and put it on social media, on Facebook. And that's the main resource. It's driven us a lot of traffic, and a lot of the studies have been successful with our ads that we do help the researchers with. And some studies will do better than the other. I know right now I worked on a sleep study, and sleep study, a lot of people, have difficulty sleeping. So a lot of people will relate, there's certain ads will do better. Also, there is a lot of rules. So I try to tell our researchers to stay away from kind of targeting a certain group. I know I worked with the College of Nursing and they were trying to target Hispanic and Latino men and women 65 and up who had heart issues, or just high blood pressure, cardiovascular issues, stuff like that. And I can't target Hispanic people. So I found a way to help is to make our ads in Spanish. Mm-hmm. So our target was very broad, but the ads were in Spanish and we were able to recruit a lot of people, and especially it was in a rural area. So we just do different tips and tricks to make the ads successful. And usually some ads, it'll take 2 weeks to show a difference, but then I'm able to go in and tweak things. And at the end of the whole research study, it's just been successful. So I'm always here to help. I tweak things, I make it better, and I give analytics, and usually all the researchers are happy about how much people they've recruited, and that's just the process. So yeah.
Well, good. Lisa Spellman, did you want to add some things to that from the public relations perspective?
Yeah, so I media relations, public relations in the department, and I work very closely with Aurelie. I also work very closely with our media relations team, so we do your news releases. I saw that even though it was still a lower turnout, it was still, it's an important aspect because getting the word out, even just in some of the small towns across Nebraska, our state is pretty unique in that usually when we send something out to those small towns and we almost spoon feed them, they run it almost word for word. So as long as everything's kosher and it's IRB approved and everything's good, those small towns run those releases, and it's pretty amazing. But we also, Aurelie joins our team, and we sit down and talk about, okay, what's going on for the week, and what releases are we sending out, what studies. We had a big, huge study last week that Dr. Gendelman's HIV work.
Mm.
But we do on all different scales, sending those out, trying to reach, and we can target different communities. So if you have something in a rural community, we can target the media in those communities. I liked what Dr. Lally said about form relationships, because we also have worked very hard to form relationships with the media. And so we can call an editor and say, hey, this is going on in your area. The other thing our team does is we work very closely with the chancellor's office. So for example, the end of the month, Dr. Gold is actually traveling to McCook, Holdridge, and Gothenburg. And so if there are things happening in that area, we often write his talking points, or give him little, here's what's happening. Or if there's something major happening in the area, we'll let him know. Because you never know who he's going to talk to, and giving him those talking points in those areas. And we're a 500-mile wide campus. You guys probably all heard that. We serve the state of Nebraska as a state institution. So it's good all around to get the information out and show our state senators and show our constituents and the citizens across the state what work we're doing in their communities. But another aspect of my job that I recently taken on, and I noticed that on some of the pre-questions you sent over, working with special populations, I work very closely with Native American tribes in the region and having more of a face-to-face encounter. So for example, I'm having a meeting with Dr. Rizzo's team talking about some of the research they're doing with the Ponca tribe of Nebraska to see how they can interface. So building those relationships slowly and carefully opens the door for other researchers to walk through and bring their work through. And they're also, you know, tribes are very savvy. They're all over Facebook. And so being able to target them then later with those kinds of ads that Aureli's talking about is really important. So yeah, we're here to help.
Many perspectives that I hadn't thought about. Thank you, Lisa. Mr. Kevin Epperson is also here, but I'm sure you hear many stories in the IRB about how to do this and what would work best for researchers, Kevin.
Well, we rely heavily on the public relations folks, particularly our social media experts.
Good.
As most of you know, social media falls under the category of IRB review because it is recruitment. And recruitment is the initiation of the process of consent to enroll a subject to a research study. So therefore, the IRB is involved in reviewing the material to make sure, one, it's accurate, two, it's not unduly influential, and three, that we don't see any red flags. Red flags are things such as promising to cure cancer or free. It was mentioned earlier about referencing the type of compensation. You can mention that subjects will be compensated, but we like to refrain away from the amount because, again, it could be unduly influential on participants. And if they want further information, there's usually a link or contact information for them to find out more details about what's involved. The challenge with social media, obviously, is once it's out there, it can be distorted and changed and modified as it's passed from person to person through social media. And that's, unfortunately, it's out of our control by that point. Now, public relations is able to rein in some of that, but not entirely, particularly if it's posted on individuals' accounts. We have had researchers who, for specific research studies, have wanted to use their own Facebook account as opposed to the university's Facebook account. So that, again, presents additional challenges that we have to consider as an IRB. What else do I want to say about social media? You know, we just look at content similar to a recruitment flyer or a letter that's sent. We want to make sure it's accurate, it provides enough information, for a subject to make a quick decision. Yes, I'm interested. No, I'm not. I'm absolutely not eligible for this, or I'm not even the least bit interested. It's interesting, the challenges that have been presented to the researchers, but it sounds like social media is here to stay and will be part of research recruitment practices going forward.
Could you just expand a little bit on then, okay, so somebody's interested, now that they've been contacted via that social media site back to a coordinator, then everything else about consenting that individual is no different than what we would normally manage?
Correct.
Okay. Good.
It'd be no different than if a person saw a flyer or something posted on a bus and they called the 1-800 number.
Mhm. Okay, good. I think before we had some other probing questions that we were going to ask, but I think given all of the people who are in attendance today, not only here in Omaha, but across the campuses, let's open it up for discussion because we, as you can tell, we have a lot of areas that we've touched base on. So are there any questions for our panelists? Otherwise, we'll add some additional probing questions for them.
Yeah, so Facebook, and then along with Facebook is Instagram. So we could also post ads on Instagram. Facebook and Instagram go hand in hand because they're the same company. And then we could also post on LinkedIn. It's a bit more expensive, but it does reach a bigger professional audience. So that's also available, those 3 platforms.
You guys want to speak up or pick up the development? They asked you, just since people asked to speak up a little bit, sorry.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
You know, I want to say a word about Facebook, and that is the privacy issue and the credibility issue. It's in the newspapers every day that patients give you access to their account on Facebook. So these patient subjects are giving you a lot of information, and they don't always know what you're doing with it. So that was a big discussion with our research team, is how do we protect patients' privacy? You know, otherwise their personal profile gets out there, and a lot of people use it in ways they weren't expecting. And the other thing is credibility. You know, it's full of false statements on, there's no filter. And so I think that's a real concern.
For those of you who have used like a social media for recruitment, do you find any difference in retaining subjects? Is there a difference in the way subjects are retained in your study based on how you have recruited them? Maybe you haven't even considered that. Carrie, you have a thought, it looks like.
That's actually a very interesting question, and it makes me want to go back and look at our subjects and see the ones that were enrolled via Facebook. Did they complete the study or did they not complete the study? So I guess I have my plans for the afternoon.
Yeah, good.
So no, we haven't looked into it.
Oh, okay.
So.
Nobody mentioned Twitter. Twitter, is that a useful way to recruit?
Yes, we could also recruit on Twitter, but at the same time, we really do consider budget, and Twitter is very expensive to advertise on. So we do put posts on there for free on our platform. So we'll also add it on Facebook, but then we'll post it for free on Twitter because it's just expensive, but it's available.
Thank you.
I think in terms of the cost of Facebook, the great thing about it is that you can kind of choose how much money you want to spend. So if you have a lower budget, you can spend less and still get the return on your investment.
Exactly. So for example, for the sleep study I did, the budget was $1,000, but by the 3rd week they had enough people, so I stopped it, and they ended up saving $500. So it just depends. It's changeable, but we do recommend starting with a $500 budget.
There was a quick question on the chat board. Can you target populations on Twitter? I know you've talked a little bit about we don't target populations, but are users different, or the population that uses Twitter different?
We can target interests. That's the best way. We can't target a certain culture or just certain people, but just interests. We do put keywords, and that's the most important way to do it.
for Twitter.
Yes.
Okay.
Or for all
All.
platforms.
Okay, good. Other questions here, Dr. Berger?
I have a question, I think probably for Robin. So in today's busy clinical environment, it's very difficult sometimes to get to the patient at exactly the right time. Like they've had a long day of testing and then they've seen the physician and they think they're ready to go. And then the physician says, I've got somebody here who's got a study you might be interested in. Is it okay if you, or would you let them come in? I'm just wondering, and I think it would be helpful to the whole group, have you had any issue when you've used Facebook when there hasn't been the interaction between a physician or a provider, such as a nurse, that asks them if you can talk to them? If using Facebook, you take away that, and maybe your physician colleague or other person is a co-investigator in the study. So we don't want to do anything to disrupt the relationship between you and your other investigators. So could you talk about that a little bit? Can you recruit in clinics and on Facebook in these other ways?
Yeah, we had the same, recruitment. We had the Facebook ad running at the same time that we were, talking to people in the clinic. Nobody said to us, "Oh, I already saw that on Facebook." Is that the question? Are we doubling up or something? I mean, Facebook goes out so randomly to every human being that is on Facebook. So the chance that somebody in clinic actually saw that is probably very rare.
It's just so interesting, particularly with Kevin here and everything, that what it takes for someone from the College of Nursing who does not have a clinical appointment in a particular area to get the chance to talk to a person and invite them to a study can be extremely, I'm waiting 45 minutes to an hour, type
it's
thing.
extremely time consuming.
It's extremely difficult. And yet using Facebook, you can get directly to the patient without waiting, and so I just wondering if you're getting any reverberations from the physician, like, well, my patient told me they're in your study, and it's like, I don't remember having you coming, and talking to them. I just trying to think about the culture.
We're working with the physician. So when we go to the clinic, I mean, and I'm recruiting brand newly diagnosed people, so they wouldn't be people that were already in the study. So there's no chance of that. And no, I mean, no physician saying, "Gee, why don't you do this some other way? Because you're taking up my time." They're very willing to, because the other research nurses are there too, recruiting for other our studies are the same. And almost no patient has ever said no to, because I only take 2 minutes of their time. I'm not asking them to sign up that day or anything else. I'm just giving them a face to see, to feel a little bit more confident about, giving them the brochure. I give them that link, the web link, that if they had gone through Facebook, they would be able to link to the page that is on our College of Nursing site. And some people like that rather than the paper brochure. They're more likely to do that. So, and all we're doing is then we're asking the patient, would it be okay? So we're getting their permission at that point, getting their signature on a little card, not a signature, but a name on a card saying, yes, I'm okay with, you following up with me. And that's it. And then it's up to them after that. If they, don't want to answer their email or don't want to answer their phone or whatever, if I follow up with them, it's completely up to them. And, as you've said in other forums, I think, it takes 10 to 20 or so people to approach before you get a yes for research. In cancer research, only 3% of all people with cancer participate in clinical trials. That includes treatment trials. That includes, and I'm doing a psychosocial behavioral trial. So if you think of all that, and that number has not changed in about 40 years.
Wow.
So you're going to have a lot of misses before you get a hit.
I also wanted to say, two things. And one is, yes, our recruitment, plan on more time and money than you thought, because it took us 4 months later. So we had to extend our marketing. And the other thing I wanted to say was, we did 30 community events and talked to clinics all over Omaha, and how many? About seven women is all we got. But we didn't think it was a waste of time because, see, that way the community knows about your study and you have credibility, and the UNMC, the clinics know about it. So then if a woman says, well, I heard about this in Facebook, still a good idea to tell the community.
Right, we've had the same experience with going to community things. I mean, I haven't really tried it much here. I had the local folks, because I'm trying to recruit all over Nebraska, and had the local folks were going to, actually I used the American Cancer Society, had community action partner there who took hundreds of my brochures out all over the state to all of their things and we had zero response to that. But yeah, I made partnerships and things with American Cancer Society folks and with those, so that at least seeing is getting the UNMC name out there, so that maybe when you approach them all again, that it's more of a trustworthy thing, or they see it multiple times and all that. It's all worthwhile in the end. It may not actually yield you a subject.
Before we have another comment, there are two burning questions from the other sites, and so we just want to share that. They wanted to know, can anyone comment or provide tips on recruitment for older populations, specifically those who do not use social media, such as you've talked about? Are there other traditional recruitment methods? And even Mr. Epperson, you probably find some unique ways people recruit. So does anybody have comments on how to reach our older adult participants that we would like in studies?
Like flyers and mailers are,
Mailers still?
yeah, mailers for sure.
Okay.
And it also depends on traditional older population. It's getting smaller, but they still watch the news, listen to the radio, pick up the paper. One of the things that I forgot to mention earlier that we do in our department, which we also have to go through IRB for review of content, but anymore when we send out press releases, it's we like to attach sound bites so radio stations can use it, and video clips, and so all those things need to be reviewed and carefully done, but they get picked up, they get used, and especially out in western Nebraska, it's pretty big radio stations that cover wide areas, and you send out sound clips, and again, it's a way for people to hear about it, so then the next time they see something related to it, it rings a bell, and they're like, oh, I saw that earlier, or I heard that on the news, or they were talking about that on the radio. So those are good methods.
Some tips. Mr. Epperson, any tips you have to recommend that you see a lot of strategies come through?
Reiterate what Dr. Lally and
Dr. Waltman?
had mentioned earlier, and that's collaborating with organizations that maybe work with the population that you're interested in studying.
Good. And then one other question from here, well, actually two more, and one is directed to Dr. Lally, but I'll mention this next one quick. Do you have any advice for recruiting hard to reach populations, such as African American men, especially with mental health? But maybe we've kind of touched on that a little bit. Because you have to target it. Is that what I hear to collaborate with where these folks might be?
Yeah, I would think, I can give an example from the last clinic I was at in New York. There was a gentleman researcher who was interested, I think, in prostate cancer in African-American men. He was an African-American man himself. And they actually had a car rally. So interesting men in something that would interest them to begin with, and it was associated with the cancer center, and so it was a health fair car rally sort of thing. So antique cars, and then they had the nurses doing the blood pressures, and then they could talk about prostate and various things. And I think it was more of a prostate screening than prostate treatment. But yeah, working with the community, and I've worked with African American women, and it's working with the community and finding your community partners and finding those who speak within the community if you're not part of the the community, whether it's men or women or whoever it is you're recruiting. Or I think the same is key for rural. I see a lot of parallels coming from trying to recruit African-American individuals in New York to coming here and recruiting our rural folks. They're very tight knit and, you know, suspicious sometimes of outsiders, and so work with the community.
Robin, keep your microphone open. This is targeted a little bit to you. It says, do you think research community outreach yields better recruitment than community members recruiting? And then specifically for Dr. Lally, when you use community members to recruit, do you think your experience would have been received more hits if they have been students and researchers assisting in community with the activities? I'm not sure.
That's a lot of
That's a
questions
lot. Okay.
there.
Well, let's sort out the first one.
Yeah, well, sort out the first one. I'm not quite sure I understand the first one.
Okay,
Community research.
Do you think research community outreach yields better recruitment than asking community members to recruit? Like maybe you gave the example of community outreach where they had a kind of
For like the American Society
yeah.
already had community
outreach.
workers. I really think it depends upon who you're trying to recruit, what disease you're recruiting for. You know, do organizations already exist? I think it's. I know a lot of researchers have set up community action, sort of, or community advisory boards. That's the word I was looking for. So if, and that's actually what I tried to do with the American Cancer Society. I had one contact person and she had all these community folks. And I went to the community folks to begin with to say, you know who the woman in your several counties, women or in those counties, are sort of the voice for breast cancer, because certain illnesses like breast cancer have those advocacy groups, or they know, you know, that this person, you know, speaks for us. And I was going to develop a community action or a community advisory council, and it's advisory to the investigator. You know, they would have probably told me, perhaps, you know, on my brochure, you know, oh no, don't use that, you know, sort of thing, and they can really help you with that. And I had another thought along those lines, and then the other question was about students. I mean, I just
she clarified. She said, "What do you think works better? The individuals helping you do it versus in-person researchers or student researchers recruiting?"
I think you need to have a multi-prong approach, I would say, to anything you do. I don't think there's one thing that works better. I know what doesn't work. It doesn't necessarily work real well to have people that don't have any sort of skin in the game trying to help you to recruit. They have to have some sort of interest. And some of my problem in recruiting is I was new to Nebraska, new here. The clinics were real out there, and you know, various places were real receptive to research and things, but trying to stay in their mind on top of things, that they're going to introduce this study when they weren't getting a whole lot of benefit or almost no benefit at all out of it, is a very difficult way to recruit. And I tried to make partnerships with them by doing focus groups to begin with, and having single arm studies so everybody got the intervention to begin with, and then going to randomized, because sometimes nurses and things are very protective of their patients. They don't want to have them randomized. They want everybody to have your wonderful thing. It's like, well, that's a study. We have to randomize. So I would just, you know, really think about it. There is no one best.
Carrie, you had an additional comment that did you want to make about recruitment?
I think with the more traditional, I think we don't forget about the word of mouth.
Yeah.
With your older population.
Yeah,
for our study, anytime somebody came in for a screening visit, we gave them a flyer. If you know anybody, let us know. And anecdotally, we had women come in and say, oh, my friend told me about it. Another way is that we sent out an email, you know, to all of our, you know, your current participants, and said, you know, do you know anybody? Here's our website, forward this email. And if you saw on that Facebook post, you know, it's the word of mouth. You know, when we posted it on Facebook, we sent out an email to our participants and we said, hey, click on this link and share our post. Here's how to do it. So it's the idea of using who you currently have in the study and the word of mouth. And that usually brings in a fair number of subjects as well.
Comment about
Yes. Go ahead, Kevin.
You know, historically, before this whole internet thing was a thing, if you had hard to reach populations, you'd use network sampling. If you were looking for drug users or homeless people, you know, you'd find somebody and ask them, who do you know? Get some kind of contact information. You go and contact them. That's network sampling.
Not IRB approved.
No.
Yeah, I can't.
See, man, I'm getting to my point here is like, so what Nancy said earlier about you've got their Facebook information now. So you can see what kind of groups they're in. Say somebody's in a breast cancer awareness group or an African American male mental health group. You go into that group, start sending messages to people. I mean, that's network sampling and it's public information, but at what point are you flirting with the line that you're going to cross?
I'll let the IRB person comment on all that.
Yeah, that's pretty touchy.
Yeah, we have to look
But
at
Kevin
each,
just.
each of those on a case-by-case
Yeah.
basis, obviously. You know, is it a private Facebook account or is it a UNMC Facebook account? Because you read all the information about policies and procedures of the institution, you are representing the institution at all times, whether you realize it or not, in all of your activities, social media, internet, etc. So the IRB would look at each recruitment methodology on its face value and determine whether we find it to be acceptable or not. And we do consultation within our office. Sometimes we take recruitment strategies to the full board for review and discussion, because you have 20 or 25 individuals who may have different thoughts than those of us in the office.
Yeah, I can just add to that. There is a big body of literature. So those of you who thought that all that sounded pretty exciting, look in the literature on recruitment about recruiting from groups of any kind, whether it be a Facebook group or meetup group or whatever. You really need to be very, very careful of the ethical lines of, if you even have an inkling in your mind, well, I'll just impersonate somebody who belongs to this group or like that, don't do it. This kind of stuff happens, and that's when you want to be talking to the IRB about that. You don't want to be joining groups falsely in order to try to recruit people and all that kind of stuff. And when I recruit within Facebook, I don't have anybody's Facebook account. I mean, this is an ad. They click, they go to the UNMC College of Nursing site. I never have any information about them that they haven't provided. They fill out a little form on there that just has their name, email, phone number, whatever they want to provide, so that I can contact them, because now they're saying to me, researcher, I'm interested, in hearing more is all that is. And sometimes I respond, or I always respond, but when I do respond, sometimes they never respond back. So it's in their court. I think that's the important thing. But yeah, there's a whole body of literature on recruiting from social media. So please read that.
It's a really good point, I think, about those closed sites. Wendy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to, this kind of circles back to what I think Ann was saying earlier, is that when you are posting on Facebook, you're almost circumventing that ethical access that we have to go. And if we approach someone, can we, maybe Kevin, you can talk about that, and I think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Ann, but I think that's kind of what you were trying to get at earlier, is that, I don't have ethical access to these patients, so I can't just approach someone versus, Facebook, we're almost just approaching them. So it's just, and I know that they have to actively click on something. So maybe that's how you,
But we're not, we're not approaching them. I'm approaching 20,000 people with a flyer. It's not approaching them at all. I know nothing about them. It goes out into the
right.
ether.
Well, and I'm just curious,
It's no different than putting up a flyer.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
And I think in terms of when you talk about the networking aspect of it, it's not, you're not going in and randomly posting on somebody's group page. We like, for instance, we partnered with the YMCA. So when we put a post out there, we asked the YMCA, hey, will you share this on your Facebook page? Or, other groups that may have an audience for them. So it was up to them whether they wanted to put our information out there or not.
Yeah, and we did the same thing. Once we had the ad out there, all sanctioned by UNMC, I asked the those contacts that I had with the American Cancer Society, can you share it? Because they had a huge network, so that they shared it. But in the past, I've also approached like the Susan G. Komen Foundation. They have rules about, I don't know about sharing, but they couldn't put anything up about my stuff on their site because it was national, but American Cancer Society, our local could, and all that. So it's networking that way. As Kevin said, and that sharing, I think, is very helpful, because then it's being shared by an organization that people recognize at that point. But it's still the same IRB approved, sanctioned, very short, not unduly influential information that they haven't changed. So.
We couldn't have gotten our subjects from just Facebook. We had, well, how many do we have? 7 different activities. What we did was we would evaluate each activity. And if it was very successful, we would emphasize it. And if not, we would de-emphasize it. So yes, Facebook was wonderful, but also provider letters, all the other things, newspaper, TV.
So back to that multi-pronged approach that you were
Yes.
talking about. All of you have talked about that.
Yeah,
Good.
just the idea of that, they may have received a postcard and they were holding on to it for a year in their purse, but then they saw it on Facebook and that's what made them pull the trigger. So even though we have stats on like, how did you hear about the study? They probably put what they're immediately, what made them come, but they probably saw some other message about our study out there.
So I usually tell the sites when they're helping me recruit, the subject or the potential subject needs to hear about it at least 3 ways. Maybe getting something in the mail, because all clinics send out something, hey, you're going to be a new patient in our clinic. So getting your brochure into there if you can, but then seeing it in the clinic and then hearing about it from their people that they trust. Those 3 things usually takes those 3, and then people will say to me, oh, I see you everywhere.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, and I know in my experience with some of the researchers, when they're trying to target rural areas, we do tell them, get on a bus, take your team with you, and go to those areas and post flyers and stuff. It takes more than just social media. It's just a boost. But word of mouth and getting into the community is very helpful too.
Good. I think, Dr. Berger, you had a comment first, and then Dr. Lonzo will go around the room.
I'll make mine really quick, but it's a question. I know that at least for cancer, and I believe for all UNMC studies, you can go, it says, what are the studies at UNMC right now? But they're real dry, like they're like 4-line explanations. And I wondered, like things like Robin's talking about, have they moved on to be more visual, for example, or exciting? Or if I go back to my office right now and I say, where can I find that website for UNMC that I want to be a research study? In a research study, what am I qualified to be in? Has it been updated, and is it more,
Yeah, so that web page that was created, you're right, it's a little dry. There's a lot of research studies, a lot of information. The links back to the sites help. But that's something that there needs to be updated, I agree.
do you know where that's located on the web?
The website, the research studies,
I'll just browse. I thought you might know right off.
not right off the top of my
Okay,
head.
thank
I
you.
don't go to that page, actually.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Lonzo, you had a comment, and then somebody else.
I had one quick question. So do you think that Facebook, social media, that because you are reaching out to a very broad general population, is it better for research for very broad inclusion-exclusion criteria? So for example, I work with a specialized population of patients with ventricular devices. There's not that many of them out there. So would Facebook not be a good recruitment tool for me because it's such a small population of people?
I think it would still work because someone might not have it, but they might know someone.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's just another helpful tool.
Somebody else had a comment?
Less likely.
So my question is about the ethics of understanding Google search term codes. I know that's kind of an area that people are exploring, understanding like what words people are using to search for a specific diagnosis, or if it's autism, say they label it as autism instead of ASD, whereas, a researcher might be more prone to saying ASD. Does the IRB have specific ideas about how that can be used and how we can better understand how to tailor recruitment materials based on code words that people are, that evidence shows people are looking at.
No, it's an interesting idea, and there's a lot of data that Google has in that regard, no doubt. But again, when the IRB is reviewing recruitment material, we just want to know, how are you going about recruiting subjects? What material are you presenting publicly? I haven't had anybody so far that I know of use Google search methodologies like that, but it's coming. No different than social media.
I know that when we talk to researchers about just for press releases, we tell them to speak in layman terms. So most people know autism, they don't know ASD. I think that would be acceptable because it's just a factual term. It doesn't sway anybody any direction. It's just what it is. So that's helpful.
Well, it looks like we are getting to the end of our time together today. Help me in thanking our panelists today. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thanks to everybody on the line who joined us today. Thank you.